Good morning, folks. How are you doing? Today is the 16th day of May, 2024. It's about 8:30 in the morning on a Thursday down here in Tampa, Florida. And of course, right on cue, you guys are going to think I've got her trained with like treats or something, but I really don't. She's just like, yep, he's talking to nobody again, so I better go make sure he's okay. Yeah? Okay. I got you. For those of you who don't know, this is Gabby. And now you know why she's Gabby. Right. Okay. Now hopefully she won't, she's a female sprayer, so hopefully she won't spray during my video. This is probably going to be a pain in the ass, but there you go. And the other animals are down there as well. They're just kind of, it's like a union meeting or something. Voting me off the island. How are you doing? It's been a couple days. I feel much better. For those of you who've sent me emails and well wishes, I thank you very much. I'm feeling much better. It's just stomach flu. It's food poisoning. But I'm much better now. Let's talk about, someone sent me, I can't give his name. It's going to be, I don't want to dox anybody. We'll call him CB. And I think it's CB. I'll check in a second. Sent me a video which sent me down a little rabbit hole. And I appreciate it. And so this video stems from me looking at that email, watching the video he sent me. I'm going to share that with you, and we're going to discuss it. It's deeply concerning, deeply troubling in a lot of ways. But I also want to send a shout out to, not a shout out, but a recommendation. I've said many times, and we've known that I've covered the situation with the World Health Organization's Pandemic Treaty and how it is a violation of our nation's sovereignty in a lot of countries. One I covered yesterday when I was sharing some news and information. Slovakia, is that his name? Is that the name of the country? Slovenia. Their prime minister was just shot, allowed to be shot, apparently by his security detail. Some just random dude was able to walk up and shoot him, kind of like what happened to Reagan, by the guy who's a family member of a longtime friend and business association of Reagan's vice president, who wanted to be president. What a fucking coincidence that was. But that just happened, and one of the reasons people think that it's got to do with Ukraine and the fact that this individual had refused to send weapons to Ukraine. Well, they refused to send weapons to Ukraine and stopped sending weapons to Ukraine back in November of 2023. But what had happened on May the 10th, was that they had decided, and announced that they were not going to participate in the World Health Organization's Pandemic Treaty because, as they said, it was a violation of the nation's sovereignty. 4 days later, he's shot. Let's remember how many, of course, President Moise. President Moise in Haiti being shot and killed by his own security detail, by the way. I know they framed some bullshit. The FBI went in there and snatched up all the fucking cameras and security footage immediately and ran off with it for their investigation. But he was shot and killed by his own security detail. And he was one of 4 or 5 heads of state who had refused to allow Pfizer and Moderna's mRNA fucking jabs access into his country because of the issues with it, and because they had done their own investigation, and because they had looked actually at the reports that Pfizer and Moderna sent along with their request, quote unquote, the demand to be given access to their people. And they said no. They looked at the fucking data, and their doctors and scientists said, no way, hell, you kidding me? So he got shot. And we did that. In all likelihood, that's probably what happened in Slovenia. I can't remember. I'm sorry, this is Mr. Fico, Prime Minister Fico. So I covered that the other day. That ties into where we are with this, but it also ties into me recommending Meryl Nass's Substack. Meryl Nass is covering the World Health Organization pandemic treaty because, and she's doing a great job with it. She's focused almost exclusively on this. A lot of information on her Substack. This is not a paid advertisement in any way, shape, or form. I'm just telling you, there are very few people who are focused. There's none that I know of. But I'm sure there's plenty of sites that I don't know about who are as focused on getting as much information about what's happening with the Plandemic Treaty as Meryl Nass is. If you don't know, and I'm old enough to be around back in the day during the Amerithrax quote-unquote investigation when it happened right after 9/11 in order to get people to to accept the legislation that wasn't very popular at the time. But the anthrax attack took place, targeting people who opposed the Patriot Act. Why terrorists would oppose us passing the Patriot Act to stop the terrorist made absolutely no fucking sense. It doesn't have to make sense in America because apparently people don't pay attention. But that's what happened. And it didn't make any sense when it happened. And everybody was like, oh, it's Iraq, it's this, it's that. They tried to hang it on one dude. He was obviously not guilty of it, and so they had to find somebody else. They found a guy by the name of Bruce Ivins. And after fucking accusing him and then getting his kids to on board with their bullshit accusations, they killed him. They tried to make it look like a suicide, took a bottle and a half of Tylenol or some dumb shit. They killed him. So that the story would end right there. He's guilty. End of story. And Meryl Nass did outstanding work on that. Pardon me. Sorry. She did outstanding work on that. She is listen, if you need a go-to place to keep up on what's going on with the Plandemic Treaty, the World Health Organization's Plandemic Treaty, Meryl Nass's Substack is certainly one to look at. This is going to factor into the discussion in a minute, and it's very important. I'm going to start off with the Chris, how dare you say that about me, I'll beat your ass, Cuomo, and his interview with Dr. Deborah Birx, and which is what somebody sent me. And this is a fascinating interview. So much packed into a little bit of fucking disinformation and propaganda. It's gonna take a little bit to go peel away all the layers of this. But I wanted to start here. And this is a video, from a video from The Hill, from Rising, from The Hill's YouTube thing, and I'm going to show you that in a second, at the end of this. We'll discuss that as well. But I just want you to understand something as we set out in this. What's happening is, come on. What's happening is they still have an agenda with their mRNA experiments. The problem is, you get all these commercials right now. Yeah, I got the pneumococcal flu pneumonia vaccine. It's from Pfizer. It's an mRNA thing. You see all these ads out there for all these different mRNA jabs. We're going to give you jabs for mRNA shit. Oh, come on, get out of there. There's nothing in there. Stop it. What? It's... Oh, my God. Really? You don't want that. just by the seat of our pants here, people. The problem is they've run out of fucking lab rats. They've run out of lab rats, which ties directly into the video that was sent to me by, I think, CB. I think that's his initials. They've run out of lab rats. And so what's happening is this. There's a catch-22 taking place. We'll discuss this in a second, but basically the gist of this is, from what I understand from the Risings of the Hill and from the New York Times article this comes from, published on May the 4th, 2024. The problem is they've only paid out, this is remarkable, in the system that they have set up to protect the pharmaceutical companies with their vaccines from the adverse effects of their vaccines. The government is set up to pay, taxpayers pay for the damages caused by the fucking vaccines, which indemnifies the vaccine manufacturers. And that's why, we had 6 vaccines, for mandatory vaccines, up until the Vaccine Act of 86, whenever it was. But then right after that, this legislation that went through, supported by the fucking vaccine industry, it went from 6 to 60 now that are mandated for fucking kids. I mean, all kind. And people, so why is autism so high? Why are peanut allergies so high? Why? That's why. Why is the spectrum? Why is 1 of every 4 kids if not more, on the autism spectrum? That's why. It's not fucking rocket science. You can figure it out. You can watch the climb of the autism rate with the climb starting in 86, whenever it was that fucking bill was passed, and the number of vaccines people were given, jabs, and it's obvious. But no, you're you're a vitriolic anti-vaccination person. I'm a common sense person. It's just common sense. Causality, coincidence isn't causal, but it's not a coincidence. This is what happened. This is the reality. Anyway, the problem is they have a different system set up for the mRNA jabs. And the different system, they've set the bar so fucking high that nobody gets paid out for the fucking vaccine damage, the damages caused by the vaccine. They've paid out $40,000, ladies and gentlemen. According to the New York Times and what you're going to see in a minute from the Rising, $40,000 is all they've paid out in terms of people injured by the glorious mRNA vaccines. That is outrageous. These things have been getting jabbed into people's arms since late 2020, early 2021. And Pfizer and Moderna, in their own documentation, tell you, the FDA tells you, there is an increased risk of myocarditis and pericarditis and other heart inflammation problems in young people, specifically young males. We know these to be facts. These are facts. And those are just a few of the problems with these things. Now we're talking about turbo cancers and, of course, blood clot issues and death. There was a guy, KTLA, I believe is a station out of Los Angeles. A beloved newscaster, a beloved anchor in the morning news program, the humor guy, the funny guy, the whatever. He's 63 years old. On Thursday, he's at work, he's doing his thing, he's got a wife, he's got 4 kids, he goes home. Friday morning, he calls in sick. Friday, 1 o'clock, his wife calls and tells him he's dead. And I was talking to Aunt BB on the phone, and I mentioned this to her, and she looked it up, and I said, they didn't say anything. And when they don't say anything about a cause of death, people assume, was he a junkie? What the fuck was he doing? Was he out in the wrong place at midnight or some shit? They tried to make sure. I saw a thing from, and they were crying on the set at like 2:00 in the afternoon. I saw that video, and it's sad. But they'll never be able to say what it was. And I was talking to Aunt Bibi, and I said, I'm guessing this guy just died suddenly. I'm guessing. She looked it up. Heart attack. Died suddenly. This is happening more and more and more. And they want to keep pushing these jabs in people's arms. What are they doing? But nobody's getting compensated. And the reason is this. From the New York Times. The government's understaffed compensation fund has paid so little because it officially recognizes few side effects for COVID-19 vaccines. And as they'll tell you on the Hill, I'll show you this. Because the standard is set so fucking high. There's no way you could ever prove that it came from fucking Pfizer or Moderna. Besides, there's long COVID. So they're never going to pay out. And vaccine supporters, including federal officials, worry that even a whisper of possible side effects feeds into misinformation spread by vitriolic anti-vaccine movements. It's going to hurt the bottom line. It'll hurt the bottom line. This is what they do. The government's understaffed compensation fund. When they want something to not work, but they have a program, make sure it doesn't work, they understaff it. Let me tell you something, another example of this. Now, Pfizer and Moderna are these two mRNA jabs, vaccines, are the only ones in this program where the bar is set so fucking incredibly high, nobody could ever really prove that it was caused by the fucking jab. Unless, of course, the jab went into his arm, into somebody's arm, and then was pulled out, and the needle just stabbed all by itself. Short of that, and that's got to be on video, and it's got to be not on one video because it could be fucking a deep fake. It's got to be on 7 different fucking videos. If you ain't got that, fuck you. Fuck you, fuck your injury, fuck your death, fuck your dead spouse, fuck your dead sister, fuck your dead children, or fuck your messed up children who are messed up for life. Fuck you. mRNA is the way to go. It's the wave of the future. Coding humans. Genetic manipulation. Remember when they told you it's not gene therapy, you fucking conspiracy theorist. Oh, yeah, by the way, it is gene therapy. This is amazing. This is amazing. They tell you right there. They tell you right there who they fucking work for. We can't pay anybody out because if there's this massive amount of payouts to people, it's going to give folks out there pause to not get more mRNA jabs. And they want to give more mRNA jabs. But the other problem to this is, and this is what's going to be something that's going to be talked about with the Deborah Birx interview, is that here's the catch-22. They're trying to push all this information aside. They're trying to push all this information down. They're trying to keep the numbers of the... They say only 8,000 people in the entire United States have filed for some kind of compensation because of injury due to the COVID-19 mRNA fucking jabs. That's bullshit. But they're deliberately keeping those numbers down and dismissing a lot of these cases in order to protect the brand of mRNA fucking vaccinations. They have to do that because this is their new cash cow, and they've got something in mind. They're looking for something. The problem is when they do that, because they don't have access to everybody's fucking medical data, like say they do in Israel. Because they don't have that, they're not getting the fucking information back that they need to learn from their fucking massive experiments. You understand? So it's a catch-22. They need to learn, but in order to learn, they need to know people who are injured. But they're keeping the numbers of the people who are injured down, and they're tossing those fucking cases out like they don't exist, because they don't want people to use that information. If that number 8,000 was more legitimate, like 80 or 800,000, then that would be a problem and people would stop getting the jabs. So it's a catch-22. So what they're doing is they've got a new PR campaign, which is what somebody sent me. Okay? So I just want you to keep this in mind. We'll get back to this in a minute. But that's where they are. That's the problem that they're facing. And I'm way into this already, so CB. Yes, it is CB. Thank you very much, CB. So this is where we're at with this. I want to play a little bit of this for you. This is from fucking News Nation. This is Chris, shut up or I'll beat your ass, Cuomo. And he's continuing to show people he can do propaganda just like he used to on CNN.
Does our government have documents that reveal where COVID really came from?
To answer your question, yeah. Yeah, they do. And by the way, so do I. You go to Lugar Center Leaks over here, and you can scroll down, and you can see the documents. You can see them for yourself. Where's the actual email? Where's the actual one? Here we go. Is this it? No. Hang on. Do they actually have documents? Yeah, these will open. You just got to click on them. Oh, here's a video for that. And here's the next one. This is where it started a long time ago. Patient 0, a likely Ukrainian soldier sent to Wuhan Games in 2019. There's Jimmy Dore lying through his teeth. Dumbest story you ever told. It's Novichok. Didn't come from China. It came from us, and that's where it came from. That's the Lugar Center. You'll be interested to know that they show a picture. I thought I recognized the building. But they're talking about this in this video, in this interview. They're going to show a couple of pictures of different labs. The Lugar Center is one of them. But there is hang on a second. When it comes to the documents, this is it right here. Does the U.S. government have documents? Yeah, they do. It came from the Lugar Center. It came from fucking Risk of Bat-Borne Zoonotic Diseases in Western Asia. And I can tell you the actual project number. Oh, that's right there, Project 1742. Yeah, they have the documents. They know exactly where it came from. Did you guys know that Moderna didn't exist 3 years before COVID-19? Did you know that DARPA and the Department of Defense and the Defense Threat Reduction Agency created Moderna, and they created Moderna to specialize in mRNA vaccine technology? Did you guys know that? Pfizer was just kind of brought in. Remember when Burla did an interview, and he said, they came to me and they told me. They said, we need a Pfizer vaccine. He goes, oh, we do a COVID vaccine. He goes, we do vaccines great down here at Pfizer. We'll get you one. we'll get a sample of fucking COVID. And they said, no, you're going to do mRNA. He said, no, we're not. We don't do, what is mRNA? We're not going to do mRNA. You're going to do mRNA. That was DARPA. That was Department of Defense. That was Defense Threat Reduction Agency. And that was Moderna, boys and girls. Moderna was made for COVID-19, and we made COVID-19. In spite of what this dimwit fucking musclehead Chris Cuomo says. If you have a hard time not believing Chris Cuomo, just remind you, remember when he did a video and he was like in his basement because he was sick from COVID-19 and he was in isolation, and he came out of his basement. Came out of the isolation, and they had the camera there, and he'd been there for 2 weeks. Remember that shit? And he couldn't even, supposedly couldn't even be around his kids. He was living in the basement for 2 weeks. Then a video came out a couple of days before that. He had gone to look at a new house. And someone had taken a video. He had taken a video. His wife had taken a video of looking at a new house to buy a new house. And they're just walking around the house and talking to people. No masks. He's a liar. It's all a show for him. And he's lying in here too. Okay? Just so you know. We'll get to those in a second. Oh, I got a whole video for you guys. I got it planned. What are you talking about?
That's what a congressional subcommittee said today. They're investigating the origins of COVID-19. They demanded more transparency on classified State Department documents. When did the State Department get these? Right? Says right there, this is the question to Blinken. But is this stuff that was given to Blinken? Or did they have this in the last administration too? Either way, we got to get to the bottom of this lab leak theory, don't we? Did China really cover it up?
Somebody covered it up. I wonder who. I wonder who would have the influence in the United States to cover it up. Did China cover it up? China. April 12th, 2024. The expansion of Birx presents both challenges and opportunities for the increasingly China-centric grouping. China is dominating and expanding Birx. Oh my goodness, look at that. What happened just the other day? You scroll down a little bit more. Oh my goodness, look at that. Putin and and Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping welcomes Russian President Putin to China. China. Why won't they tell us China did it? Why won't they say China did it? Well, that's because China didn't do it. But why is he so focused on China? February 1st, 2024. Countries are clamoring to join Birx. We are losing the war in the fucking heavens. I'm just telling you, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, when you are ready, willing, and able to repeat the bullshit coming from the organizations that are run by people like Steve Bannon and Steve Bannon himself and his whole network of fake alt-right fucking news organizations. The new Committee on the Present Danger. Look up the old Committee on Present Danger. Look up the bullshit they did back in the 80s and the early 80s. Pushing the fucking Cold War against the Soviet Union. Making up lies about the threat the Soviet Union posed to us. Right before they fucking collapsed. I'm just saying. You want to know why they pushed the China thing? First of all, they pushed the China thing because they don't want you to know who made this. And more importantly, why. But also because it serves their interests. All you got to do is just look at the fucking news. Every time something like this comes out, guaranteed, something like this is happening in the background. Guaranteed.
Should we have a 9/11 style commission to look into everything connected with COVID? I say yes.
I say yes. We need a new 9/11 style commission. In spite of the fact that the 9/11 commission report was one of the most fraudulent, even more fraudulent than the Warren Commission, if you can believe that. Even more fraudulent than the Warren Commission. David Ray Griffin is one of the best fucking researchers 9/11 ever produced, or the 9/11 truth movement ever produced. By far and away the best, hands down. I strongly recommend this book, The 9/11 Omission Report, Omissions and Distortions. This is from PBS. This quote I'm going to read you is PBS. Oh wait, no. That's something else on the vaccines. We'll deal with that in a second on Netanyahu. Listen. You want to understand where the 9/11 Commission, how fucked up it was. I'll tell you one thing. Philip Zelikow was the chief executive of the 9/11 Commission. He wasn't the chairman, but he was the chief executive. Several of the chairmen said this thing was rigged from the start. Several of the chairmen came out and said this thing was rigged from the start. While it was going on. They didn't even cover fucking Building 7. And they had to get NIST to come out and explain to people why the buildings fell down in the first place. And they didn't want to cover Building 7. There's all kinds of statements and all kinds of testimony that they excluded. There's all kinds of questions that the families of the people who died on 9/11 had, serious questions, serious concerns that they silenced and excluded. Multiple holes. They tried to get Kissinger, of all people, to be the executive in charge. Not the chairman, but the executive in charge of it. And the families themselves said, no, Kissinger, are you kidding me? They went with a guy named Philip Zelikow because they had no idea who he was. Philip Zelikow had co-written a book with Condi Rice. Philip Zelikow he served on the Bush fucking Transition Committee, and Philip Zelikow was one of the Vulcans Condi Rice had put together with a number of people, neocons, who were all involved in it, in the lead up to the election, to come up with George W. Bush's foreign policy platform, supposedly. Bullshit. They were planning 9/11. And Philip Zelikow was there. He showed up. He was made executive. He had in his hand, when he showed up on day one, a rough outline of exactly what the fucking 9/11 Commission report was going to find. He had it in his fucking hand. That's the 9/11 Commission. That this guy says, we need one to show how China did this to us on COVID-19. That's exactly what we need.
Don't you want to learn? All these BS conspiracy theories and everybody making things up that just feel right and fuel their agendas and politics. Don't you just want people who don't have a dog in the game to look at it, say what worked, what didn't? The parties only care about what advantages them, not you. We can do better. Let's bring in Dr. Deborah Birx. She was the White House COVID response coordinator during the pandemic. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, which is why we should certainly trust her. She was the White House, she was the coordinator for this fucking experiment during the pandemic. So we should definitely trust Deborah Birx.
I've always been dogged by this. I've always felt that we could know where this thing came from, but China just doesn't want to comply.
We could know where it came from, but China's getting in the way and not telling us it came from them. It didn't come from China. It came from us. It came from us. Here's that picture. Keep in mind that picture, because I'm pretty sure you're going to see that picture again in a few seconds here. Hang on a second.
You think it's as simple as that at the end of the day?
Well, we knew that from the beginning of the epidemic and the pandemic, that China wasn't being transparent. If you remember, they were telling WHO that there was no human-to-human transmission when they were having their hospitals overrun with people with symptoms. So this lack of transparency existed with SARS. It existed with COVID. I'm hoping we learn our lesson and that like-minded countries get together and form...
Like-minded countries get together and do what?
A real treaty of sharing information.
A real treaty. That's the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty she's pushing, by the way.
But at the same time,
they're still showing, look at this. They're still showing where the bat soup came from, where the pangolin meat was sold. As if you can get COVID-19 from the pangolin meat This is so fucking stupid.
Called for over and over, just like you, a 9/11-like commission where all of this is laid out and there's transparency with the
Is that it? No, that's the one in China.
American people. When we talk about rebuilding trust in science and data and information, it starts.
They show you this. This is a level 2 lab.
See with the American people. When we talk about
This is a level 2 lab. You don't work you need a level 4 to do fucking gain of function research on dangerous viruses. Would you like to see what a level 4? That's a level 4. That's the Lugar Center in fucking Tbilisi, Georgia. By the way, they're having a big issue in Georgia where they want to force the people who work for our NGOs in places like the Lugar Center to register as foreign agents. And of course, the people who work here, who get the paychecks, they don't want to do that because they know that that's going to cause a problem. It's going to cause a lot of these NGOs to leave, and they're going to lose their jobs. So they're all pissed off and they're up in arms right now. But that's a level 4 facility. This is not a level 4 facility. You don't have, when you're in there working with highly toxic, you don't have a thin piece of fucking plastic between you and everything else that could get caught on anything and torn. That's not a level 4 facility. They're not working in this instance, they're not working with dangerous airborne pathogen viruses. It's just not happening. That's not how a level 4 facility works. Okay? I'm just telling you that right now. The World Health Organization did go to Wuhan Institute of Virology, and they did look at it, and they did realize it's a level 2 facility. They already knew that to begin with, and they said they don't have the equipment and they don't have the setup to do gain of function. They couldn't have made COVID-19 in that facility. Couldn't have done it. That's not what they're doing. But it looks impressive because they got like hoses and they got the big suits. She knows the difference. He's too stupid to know jack shit. He wouldn't know if he was wearing one of those suits himself right now. But she knows the difference. But she's a fucking liar. And remember, she's one of the ones who brought it to you in the first place and coordinated all of it. All of it, including the attempts to push mandates on people and the actual pushing of mandates on people working for the government.
Rebuilding trust in science and data and information, it starts.
But she's smiling and she's always happy and she's in your and she's a great spokesperson.
With transparency. What mitigation worked? What about the vaccines? What about long COVID? What about lab leak? And are we taking precautions to prevent a future lab leak? Because people are working with zoonotic viruses every day in
It's not zoonotic, it's zoonotic.
multiple labs across the globe. And so what practices are we changing?
Was that it? I think that might have been it. I don't know.
So, Doc, AstraZeneca made a headline today pulling the vaccine. They say it's because the demand curve is...
Oh, okay, so where is a 4-minute mark? It's a 4-minute mark I want to move towards. Hang on a second. Because they're talking about AstraZeneca, and they got, the problem... Here's the thing with AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca was, I think, a 2-shot or a 1-shot. It was one. Johnson & Johnson was a 1. AstraZeneca, they weren't mRNA. They were old-fashioned. Old-fashioned. They were vaccines. And so they were, once you had the shot, once you had the shot, there was no need to get boosters and boosters and boosters. It did its thing. That was it. Off they went. They stopped making them. They took them off the market because now they're trying to say, oh my God, look at that. The old school fucking vaccines don't work and they're taking them off the market because they don't work because they're dangerous. We got to go to this new stuff, the newness, the hot newness, which of course is the mRNA. It's all about pushing the mRNA technology because they're not fucking done with it yet. All right? Just keep that in mind. Now, that's the section on the AstraZeneca. AstraZeneca said, their statement was, there's nobody buying them anymore because it's done. So of course we're not fucking pushing the goddamn COVID-19 fucking jabs anymore. But that's not, that's not the narrative that they're going to push.
I do believe, and that's what you're getting at, were there issues with the vaccines when you've immunized millions, close to billions of people? Tracking that will give us critical information, because I love that you had Sean on, and he made the point. A lot of his symptoms are similar to long COVID symptoms. Well, that makes total sense. That happens often with immunizations, that if the natural disease can cause it, then it also can sometimes be seen in certain profiles of the vaccine. We should be studying that right now. Tell the people with long COVID and vaccine reactions to come forward. Study their genetics. We're in the 21st century. We know how to solve these issues, but we're not really bringing all the pieces we have to bear.
We're not bringing all the pieces we have to bear. What is she saying? What is she saying? She's saying they want people to come forward with vaccine injuries because they don't have access, because we have civil rights in this country that apparently they don't have in fucking Israel and other places. I'll explain that in a second. But they don't have access to everybody's medical history. They need that. This is an experiment. They're looking for something. This is an experiment. This is a massive fucking, this is the world's largest medical experiment in history. They're looking for fucking data. And they need people to come forward who got the jabs to give them access so they can look at the medical records and see, okay, so we were working on this with this particular group of vaccine recipients. And we see that it had this result, this result, this result, this result. She mentions genetics. She mentions genetics. She said it. She wants access to their fucking, she wants to look at their fucking genetics. Why? Because they want to see what they've fucking changed. There's a website called How Bad Is My Badge? And it's at //howbad.info / I'm sorry. This is it right here. They are tracking by the fucking damages and by locales and locations. They are tracking. These batches are all fucking different. And I'm not talking about from one fucking variation of COVID-19 to the next. I'm talking in the same fucking days, the same fucking weeks, supposedly the same batches going out to deal with the new strain of COVID-19. They weren't the same. Damn it. This is why I don't do long videos anymore. They weren't the same. They weren't. They're looking for something. They're testing shit. They're testing respiratory fucking, something targeting the respiratory systems here, or the circulatory systems there, or the the liver and the kidneys, or reproductives. They're changing the fucking vaccines. They're different. They're different batches. They're different batches. It's different shit. It's an experiment. That's why she needs the genetic fucking access to check these people's genetic codes to see the effects, to get the results from their experiments.
How to solve these issues, but we're not really bringing all the pieces we have to bear. Then it also can sometimes be seen in certain profiles of the vaccine. We should be studying that right now. Tell the people with long COVID and vaccine reactions to come forward. Study their genetics.
Study their genetics. With a big smile on their face. Their problem is, God damn it, they don't have enough fucking new people coming in getting the jabs. So they need to really to squeeze down on the people that have already gotten the jabs so they can learn as much as they possibly can. And they can make adjustments here and they can make tweaks there and they're looking for something. They're looking for something very specific. What they want is what Benjamin Netanyahu gave to Pfizer. I'm going to read this to you. This is from PBS. Pardon me, I'm sorry. After sprinting ahead in the race to inoculate its population against the coronavirus, Israel struck a deal with Pfizer, promising to share vast troves of medical data with the international drug giant in exchange for the continued flow of its hard-to-get vaccine. Proponents say the deal could allow Israel to become the first country to vaccinate most of its population while providing valuable research that could help the rest of the world. But critics say the deal raises major ethical concerns, including possible privacy violations and a deepening of the global divide that enables the wealthy countries to stockpile vaccines as poorer populations, including Palestinians in the Israeli-occupied West Bank and Gaza, have to wait longer. This is the thing. It's not about protecting the people because they all knew. He knows, and she knows. The vaccines did jack shit to stop you from catching COVID. Nothing. Remember when they told you? Where's that quote? I put a quote up here. Where's that quote? In December of 2020, Pfizer-BioNTech Phase 3 clinical data for its original vaccine showed 95% efficacy for preventing symptomatic COVID. Really? God damn it. It never showed that. That's just a flat-out lie. It never showed that. Never once. It was a lie. It was never about protecting the population. It was always about giving a certain class of people what they wanted. And this was Benjamin Netanyahu patting himself on the back for handing over the full medical details and information and history of everybody, 98% of the people in Israel, to a fucking company that was giving them all of these fucking jabs and mandating them in the fucking state of Israel to turn his. He tells you himself at the end of this, he let them turn fucking Israel into their own fucking laboratory.
We came out of COVID first. I described that in my book, My Conversations with Albert Bourla of Pfizer, and I persuaded him to give tiny Israel the necessary vaccines to get us out first from the COVID. And the reason I could do that is because we have a database, 98%, a medical database. 98% of our population has digitized medical records and little card. And anywhere you go in any hospital in Israel, north, south, doesn't make any difference. Boom, you punch it in and you know everything about this patient for the last 20 years. I said, we'll use that to tell you whether these vaccines, what do they do to people, not individual people, not with their individual identities, but
that's a lie.
Statistically, what does it do to people with, meningitis? What does it do to people with high blood pressure? What is it? You want to know that. So Israel became, if you will, the lab for Pfizer. And that's how we did it. We got it out and we gave the information to the world. Not only, it's been published in medical magazines and so on.
He turned this whole fucking country. He sold out his. Look at his face. He's looking down at the ground. He sold out his entire fucking country. I'm sure he got heavily compensated for it, but he sold out his entire fucking country to a corporation so that they can run their fucking experiments. The same kind of corporation here that our government has sold us out to. And they would love, and they would love to give up all of your medical data. They would love to mandate these fucking experiments on you, and they would love to give out all the fucking medical data to Pfizer and Moderna, so they can learn as much as they possibly can, so they can make changes, so they can make adjustments, so they can see. They want your genetic fucking code, because that's what this vaccine does. It manipulates, it fucks with, it changes your genetic code. And I know that was a vitriolic anti-vaccine movement statement back in the day. It was a conspiracy theory back in the fucking day. It's a fucking fact. And we know that now. There's a lot of things we know about this shit now. A lot of things. We also theorized about this, at least I did, saying they're never going to let people get, the right kind of compensation, because as they do, the faith in this shit will just go right down the fucking tubes. So they can't have that, because they're not done. And when I say they're not done, I mean they're not done with their fucking plans. And what are the plans?
The next big projects of humankind will be to overcome old age and death, to find the keys, the secret to happiness, and to basically upgrade humans into gods.
That's part of the plan. That's a good friend of Klaus Schwab and very associated with the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset plans. That's Yuval Noah Harari, if you don't know. But he's not the only one who told you.
I think there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs on the medical front, particularly around synthetic mRNA. Although you can basically do anything with synthetic RNA, DNA. It's like a computer program. So, I think with enough, with effort that's not too crazy, you could probably stop aging, reverse it if you want.
They're looking for something. With an effort that's not too crazy. With an effort that's not too crazy, you can stop aging, reverse it if you want. What is an effort that's not too crazy? What is an effort that's not too crazy? Is it this? Sure sounds like it.
In the 21st century, we know how to solve these issues, but we're writing that right now. Tell the people with long COVID and vaccine reactions to come forward. Study their genetics. We're in the 21st century.
Study their genetics. Make them come forward. Tell them to come forward. Part of the problem is they're in a catch-22. She knows Pfizer and Moderna and these motherfuckers, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, DARPA, Department of Defense, National Institute of Health, Anthony Fauci. She knows that what they are looking for, they need more fucking data. Unfortunately, they don't have automatic access to it like he gave up in Israel. So, here she is on this propaganda outlet, hosted by Chris, I'll beat your ass Cuomo, begging for that fucking data. Come forward, come out there, give us all your data, do it willingly. We need to study that. Why? So they can learn from their mistakes. That's the whole point of all of this. And it always fucking was. The New York Times has exposed the fact that only 8 vaccine injury claims have been paid out in America because the flunkies working for the government are of the mindset that if more get paid out, it'll fuel anti-vax sentiment and that will hurt big business. So fuck you, fuck your injuries, fuck your dead or crippled for life children. We are of, by, and for big business. That is a fact. I'm going to play a little bit of this video for you, so you can watch it, and then I'm going to wrap this thing up. This came out yesterday. This show came out yesterday on The Hill. This is Rising from The Hill TV. I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know the individuals in it. But this is fascinating. I'm just going to play this through without stopping it, without breaking it. I'm going to play about half of it for you so you can get a feel for just how fucking miraculous this is. The land of the free and the home of the brave, the shining city on the hill. And our government thinks so little of us and are focused so intently on making sure that people aren't afraid of the mRNA jabs. They don't give a fuck. You have to pay for if your child is injured and it's obviously caused by the fucking jab that was like that dude who got hit, was playing football, fell over dead, died on the fucking field of Monday Night Football. They went through all kinds of loops. Through hoops. They brought some guy to pretend like he was him. Hamlin was his name. At one of the fucking football games, but you gotta stay back. You can't take and his head was covered and they couldn't see his face. They said, "Oh yeah, but that's him." It wasn't him. Clearly wasn't him. They did everything they could to try to keep people from realizing this guy was a young, healthy man who got a fucking booster shot and a vaccine because the NFL mandated that shit, or certain teams mandated that shit. So he had to get it. And he fucking he died suddenly. In his case, he just happened to do it on live fucking Monday Night Football television. He died. He was dead on the field, and they brought him back to life. Miraculously, the EMTs and the doctors who were there got him breathing again, brought him back to life, and he's alive. He played, I think, one game for 2 minutes last year. They tried to give him the most improved or the comeback player of the year award for that because it's propaganda. And of course, nobody ever. There's an interview showing him, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know." And somebody asked him, "Could it possibly be something with the vaccine?" He's like, I told you a while ago that when this happens to celebrities or people who are in the public eye or in the public view, when this happens to them, I told you, I guarantee you, either it's them who are if they're still alive or family members. Like the family members, I don't want to make any assumptions or accusations, but like the family members of this particular newsman who passed away, unfortunately, at the young age of 63, died suddenly. I guarantee you, now I'm not specifically talking about his family, but in some cases, they come to them and say, "Listen, $40,000 have been paid out through the official fucking channels. If you want to go that way, be my guest and talk about fucking COVID-19 jabs." Or you can be smart and you can say it was something else or just avoid talking about it altogether, and we'll, under the table, take care of you and take care of your family and take care of your kids and make sure your kids get into good schools in the next couple of years. Or you can grow a conscience and see how that works out for you. I guarantee you that's happening. I promise you that is happening. Let's take a quick look at this because it is important. That's kind of loud.
Remember when COVID was a thing? Well, received the vaccine sure do. Almost 9,000 Americans have filed injury claims saying that the vaccine, all forms of it, caused them serious side effects. Now, few of these claims have succeeded, however. Reason Magazine's Christian Britschke reports that for injuries related to the vaccine, the government's Countermeasures Injury Compensation Program has paid only 8 of those claimants. A recent New York Times article explained why so little had been paid out, writing, quote, "The government's understaffed compensation fund has paid so little because it officially recognizes few side effects for COVID vaccines, and vaccine supporters, including federal officials, worry that even a whisper of possible side effects feeds into misinformation spread by a vitriolic anti-vaccine movement."
Right. Right. Even a whisper of the fucking truth will cause people to not want to participate in our next big experiment. That's exactly right. Because people will have what he has just fucking said is we want to make sure people don't have what's called informed consent. We want consent. We want misinformed consent. We want disinformed consent. So we're going to hide the problems like they did from the very beginning. Remember when they were trying to force fucking Pfizer through a Freedom of Information Act request to give up certain information and just show the test results in the first 3 phases of the goddamn tests, and share it with the public. And this is early in the process. And then some kind of, I think it was the FDA or somebody ruled on it saying, well, we're going to release a little bit, but the rest is going to have to wait 75 fucking years. What's 75 years? It's a lifespan. They wanted to withhold that data for 75 fucking years. From the beginning, it's been about keeping people away from being able to have informed consent. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, you take out informed consent and then you add in things like fucking, mandates for various businesses and the government. And what do you have? You have fucking Dr. Mengele in Nazi Germany. That's exactly what you have. By the way, since we're talking about Mengele, I want to say this too. I've mentioned this bitch, Kirikow, whatever her name is. You know who I'm talking about. She's the doctor. When it first came out, when the mRNA jabs first came out, she was the front person for this. And she's an immigrant. She's a woman. She's older. Exactly, because back in those days, it's still bashing white men. If you don't believe me, just look up Nikola Jokic. It's still about bashing white men. So she was perfect. She was a perfect pitch person for this. And she was one of the ones who was the early stages of developing mRNA fucking vaccine technology. She was with the University of Pennsylvania, and she was developing this idea. Then we could code. And then, of course, she went to BioNTech right before this whole thing kicked off, because they knew somehow, like Event 201 knew somehow. Apparently she had retired or some shit, and I saw this glowing article about her. It was lovey-dovey. She saved hundreds of millions of lives. It was like she was Jonas Salk or something. And she's just glowing on the success of the fucking mRNA jabs. It is the most unsuccessful vaccine in history. There's only one that I know of, and I'm not intelligent enough to know about a whole lot of vaccines, but I do know one thing. The smallpox vaccine, when it first came out, they tried it in the 40s, and they gave it to a bunch of kids. So polio. Smallpox, polio. One of those, polio. It killed a bunch of kids and crippled a bunch more. And then it was 30 more years. Came out in the 60s or something. They came out in late 50s, 60s. After extensive testing, and they got it right. It took them that much time. That was probably before this, that was probably the least successful vaccine. Well, the swine flu one of 1976 was just complete bullshit, because the swine flu of 1976 didn't exist. It just didn't exist. Again, not hard to figure out. Look up fucking 60 Minutes expose on the swine flu of 1976, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. It just didn't exist. So that's probably the least effective of all of them, really. But this, remember when Rachel Maddow told you that, take the vaccine, it's going to stop. It'll stop the infection right there. You won't catch it. You won't transmit it. It'll stop it. That's what she first said. Turns out, you can catch the COVID, you can carry the COVID, you can transmit the COVID, you can get sick from the COVID, you can be hospitalized from the COVID, and you can die from the COVID after taking the vaccine. And not just one shot of the vaccine, but then the other shot of the vaccine, and then later the booster and the booster and the booster, and pow, you're dead from the COVID-19. Or you're dead from heart attacks. Or long COVID, or fast-acting cancers, all sorts of things, or blood clots and pulmonary embolisms. There's a whole long list of things. And they're growing. The list is growing. She probably has done, as in terms of the scientists, they did a movie recently about Oppenheimer. What a hero he was. He's probably, because VX hasn't really been used that much that we know of. Oppenheimer's probably a scientist who's more responsible for killing people. Well, the guy he came up with, was it Nobel? The guy he came up with dynamite? She's up there with him. In terms of people she's killed, her work is killed. And she's revered. At some point in time, if there were a real investigation, and there's been plenty of investigations, they just don't want to acknowledge them. They want a 9/11 type investigation. They want a Warren Commission type investigation. One that comes to the right conclusions for Deborah Birx and others, and Anthony Fauci, and I don't know, Harari, and of course Elon Musk, and all of those people. That's what they want. Let me play a little more of this for you. I want you to see the guest they have on here, because it's interesting.
Christian Brischke, my colleague at Reason Magazine, joins us now to discuss. Welcome to Rising, Christian.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So obviously the New York Times has called more attention to this recently, but you've also written about the issue for a couple of publications. Tell us how, and this has come up in my conversations with you, tell us how, with the COVID vaccine in particular, the process for making some kind of claim that you were injured by it, it seems to actually differ from those of other previous vaccines.
Yes, so the government has two programs for compensating people with vaccine injuries. There's the long-standing vaccine injury compensation program that's existed since the 1980s, and this program provides a liability shield for pharmaceutical companies, and what it does is it allows those who are claiming an injury from a vaccine to effectively sue the government for compensation. This program is
right.
It's faster than normal civil litigation. It has a lower standard of proof, and so it ends up paying out about $200 million a year to those who've claimed a COVID injury vaccine.
$200 million a year.
The government will also pay for your lawyers. There's pretty generous caps for damages. You can get compensation for pain and suffering. And again, this is the program for normal vaccines.
So he just messed up. He said $200 million a year for COVID-19, for COVID vaccines. He didn't. That's not what he meant. He said he meant $200 million a year for normal vaccines. That's not what he meant. He's going to tell you in a second. The COVID vaccines fall into a different category.
COVID vaccine program is entirely different.
Right.
Not only are you not allowed to sue a pharmaceutical company for a COVID vaccine injury, you're not allowed to sue the government either. Instead, what you do is file a claim for compensation with this program, the Countermeasured Injury Compensation Program. And that's an administrative process. Basically, bureaucrats at the Health and Human Services Department look at your compensation form and decide whether or not they want to pay you. It's also worth noting that the standard of proof under this program is far higher than what it is under the normal vaccine compensation program. And so as a result, effectively, very few people have gotten compensated for COVID vaccine injuries. I think it's about a dozen people have been paid out collectively $40,000 in damages. And again, that's versus the $200 million or so that the standard vaccine compensation program pays out.
Okay, so just this will be in the on my website. You go. I know this is going to be on YouTube and BitChute, my video. You go to my website, you'll see the video front page. You click on the thing and go on the fold, whatever it is, and you will see. Pardon me again. You will see all of the links to all of these things. The videos are here, and the links are here as well. Clearly, what he said was $40,000 has been paid out in total. In total. $200 million a year in all other vaccine fucking cases. By the government, by the way. They don't want to cause vaccine companies and manufacturers any fucking profit losses. So the taxpayer pays that shit. You pay that shit. And the standard of proof is lower than even in a civil trial, much less a criminal trial, but a civil trial. I mean, if you can just barely show a preponderance of evidence by 1% in any other vaccine, like Johnson & Johnson, like AstraZeneca. But the fucking COVID-19 vaccines, no. The mRNA jabs, no. They are not going to pay you. And they tell you exactly why they're not going to pay you. Because they're not done yet. They haven't found what they're looking for. It's not over. And you and I and everybody else in these circles of the vitriolic anti-vaccine movement, we know. And this ties right back into Meryl Nass and fucking World Health Organization's pandemic treaty. When the pandemic treaty is implemented, and they are able to mandate that we take the jabs, they are able to mandate that we give up our personal information, all of our healthcare information, all of our history of healthcare, and everything else. Everything else. You got a wart on your hand you saw a doctor for when you were 15 years old. Pfizer wants to know about it. Moderna wants to know about it. These people who were coding your genetic codes, they want to know about it. Because they want to know what their fucking jabs are doing to your genetic code. Because they have a fucking reason. They have a reason, folks. They haven't found what they're looking for. And they are determined to get there. They're not done with us yet. Anyway, I know it's been a long video. I've been kind of away from the COVID-19 thing, from the mRNA jabs thing, from the epigenetic reprogramming of aging thing for a little while because of what's happening in Gaza. And but I have not forgotten it. I've not gone away from it. I'm not hiding from it. It is what it is. This is the reality. And they are still spinning up the bullshit. You know, they are begging for a 9/11 commission, for a Warren Commission type investigation into what happened in the origins of COVID, so they can have an official verdict, like the magic bullet theory. They can have an official verdict of where it came from, and you know what worked and what didn't work, so that when the pandemic treaty comes into effect, they have no problems mandating from some outside agency outside the United States, letting them mandate that you get the jabs in spite of, and give up all your information in spite of our constitutional protections. They're not done. And we shouldn't be either. You take care, folks.